So I know safety, training, all of those things are a huge challenge, especially when we look at the climate targets and the figures and the kind of number of installations we need to reach net zero. It's massive. But some of the issues we want to touch on are talk about equipment using hydrocarbons, issues around poor design, and also with the training, installers not knowing a lot about hydrocarbons, some of the challenges there. So shall we start with you, Stuart? Talk about Australia?
In the smaller heat pump domestic systems, they're installed typically by plumbers, right? And I think, you know, again, I'm not particularly active in that part of the market myself, but when I look at a lot of the online videos, there seems to be a lot of people recommending that before you commence any work on or near a unit containing a hydrocarbon, you run a leak detector over it, right? And it seems like a pretty good safety practice before you commence any brazing work, electrical work, whatever in the vicinity, you know. So I think there's some basic training, good practices that we can put in place around working with hydrocarbons, you know, and that means education, that means making sure these people have got the right tools, etc. You know, in the larger part of the market, big commercial systems, you've got consultants, contractors that generally have more knowledge and training around the standards and the requirements.
Sure.
So it's still a significant issue, but to a lesser degree, right?
Okay.
It's when you're we're not dealing with refrigeration trades installing these residential hot water systems, right? They're typically done by plumbers. So, you know, I think that's the big challenge as I see it. It's us as a HVAC&R industry interfacing with other parts of the industry that install systems that use refrigerant. The biggest risk of any refrigerant, particularly in a large quantity, has always been asphyxiation, right? And I think that's always been underestimated, and you know, we don't typically treat safety enough with large volumes of refrigerant, the way we store it, transport it, handle it, use it, etc. But now we're moving into the new era, and particularly around flammability, which adds another degree of complexity to the safety requirements, right? And so again, we need to step up as an industry and make sure that there's plenty of awareness, training, at least in our own industry, but again, make sure that these programs are available to other industries that also install similar pieces of equipment that use refrigerants.
In Europe, it was all about climate change, and HFCs was a low-hanging fruit, and for Europe to meet its Kigali commitments, they just decided, let's ban HFCs. It's easy, it is, but then what's the solution? Well, actually at the moment, apart from some HFOs, it's hydrocarbons. So there is the issue of safety, but you've got within industry two schools of thought. Those who already been using propane for quite a while, and those who are still with R32 and other great HFCs, which do a brilliant job and are energy efficient. So you're right, the whole discussion now is focused on, you know, how quick can the market move to hydrocarbons, because policy is effectively pushing us down that road. So, you know, the training and certification is the key issue. And earlier on we were saying that there's just not enough installers out there. It's not mandatory yet. It's becoming mandatory that if an installer has to use propane with propane, not in the self-contained monoblock, but otherwise. But how long is it going to take to train enough people in that European market? We're supposed to get 60 million heat pumps by 2030. So it's just not going to happen because it's not there. And so the concern, the safety, is that there'll be a lot of carboys, perhaps, people who perhaps are good-willed, but are just going to try and get a sale and just put in a piece of equipment, and then it's down to the responsibility of, is it the manufacturer, is it the consumer? And I think manufacturers in Europe, that's what my members are saying, they're extremely concerned about it because they feel actually at the end of the day they're going to get blamed. Comes back to them. So this is a really good question, and I guess maybe in 5 years' time we can see where that certification's coming in. But there's literally, as we speak, I think, but maybe today there's a rule that's coming out from the EU about how they're going to make sure that installers are trained and the levels to which they have to go to. But is that enough? This is also what we're wondering. And so you've got a lot of manufacturers who are actually getting their own installers as part of their teams. So coming back to what you were saying, Stuart, bringing in more the consultant levels on the bigger pieces.
This is a very big issue. And the ones that are pushing hydrocarbons, the ones that are saying that we should go with here, keep on bringing up examples saying, well, they currently have a boiler or a furnace or hot water or a stove that uses natural gas. Why is there a big issue, using it for cooling? You have to understand, and most people don't understand, that there's a difference between using a fossil fuel as fuel and as a refrigerant. First off, they're able to odorize it so you can smell the gas. When it's used as a refrigerant, you can't do that, and we've been doing tests and doing research at AHRI to see if we can do different things to odorize it, and so far we can't because it impacts the gaskets, the compressors, the different things, and so we haven't found anything that can do that. So there isn't going to be a smell. And so you need to train them that you need to use these really highly specialized detectors, but the detectors are only as good as the sensors are in there and how old they are and being replaced. And so I think, that understanding that it's not a fuel, it's a refrigerant and it's different. The other issue is this push, and Russell, you kind of hit this before. They're being installed, they're being pushed to be installed. And as soon as there is an accident, which there will be, this is then going to, which we tried to explain to different groups that are pushing these. Yeah. We need to do this in a stepwise fashion. We need to learn, and let's use A2Ls right now, figure out how to use mildly flammable refrigerants, do it safely and install. And then, 10 years down the road after we've had that and people and the installers understand that, we can start moving to these things, because if we move too quickly and there is an accident, it goes from being a technical issue to a political one. And when it becomes political, you're going to have the politicians saying, well, this isn't safe, it's dangerous, we're going to ban it. And then where do we go as an industry? Because all of a sudden, and we saw that happen for the longest time with ammonia, after Bhopal and all that, where they're still trying to recover from all the negative things there, even in industrial refrigeration situations where it is a perfect refrigerant. The head of one of the large China manufacturers, we walked to the window and they had all these tall buildings. And he goes, you notice something? And you see condensing units, one right on top of the other. He goes, all it takes is one of them to go with the hydrocarbon, and you have a Roman candle. And so they're very concerned just because of their construction as well. So again, stepwise training, information, and learning how to use things in a way that's rational.
And from Australia's point of view, I think we're a little ahead of you guys in some respects. We've got an incredible licensing scheme, but it only covers 80%. It doesn't cover all refrigerants. It's called the Australian Refrigeration Council, but it doesn't cover all refrigerants, which is kind of a little bizarre. So, and I think, yes, there's training is important. It's the consumer training, there's the installer training, without a doubt. But you've also got to have some sort of good compliance. There's no point having training if there's no compliance regime. And we're really lucky. We've got a fantastic compliance regime. We just park that over there because it's a safety issue more than an environmental issue, which is a bit frustrating. And I think the other thing that we face is that there's the low-end technology is an open-loop system. So you've got 290 running around the outside of a coil. Yeah. And the poor uneducated plumber, he could have been working on a mono system in the morning. Mm-hmm. This system looks exactly like the one he just worked on. The two pipes running between the heat pump and the tank had water in them. This must have the same. Bang. He gets out his cutter. And you're right, Steve, it's for us, it's not a matter of if, it's now when.
Lower GWP refrigerants and refrigerants are part of the net zero. I think the big issue is how do you define net zero in moving forward. If you really look at it, moving to an A2L and having the efficiency in moving more products from furnaces or gas boilers to heat pumps would have a much greater effect than lowering the refrigerant being used from where it is using R32 or 454B down to isobutane, propane, or any of those. Again, because they need to look at the overall impact. Yes, the refrigerant itself might have a lower GWP, but that only impacts the environment if it is emitted out into the atmosphere. If we properly maintain it, control it, both during the process, during its use, don't have leaks, and then recover it at the end, the environmental impact is very small, where the biggest impact is the actual operation of that system. And I think the efficiency that we get from some of these HFOs and A2L refrigerants is significant, and thereby reducing the overall emissions. Even until we get to fully renewable, we're still producing electricity with coal, gas, and other things. And so the overall emissions would get there much quicker. So I think the focus on refrigerants is wrong. I think we took care of that with the Kigali Amendment. We made those commitments. We're reducing it. The entire world's going to be down by 2050 on that overall. And so really the focus should be improving heat pumps, making them safer, and reducing their environmental impact and energy use.
I know in Europe, net zero is a sort of a key adage, so the whole industry saying, we're committed to net zero. What does it really mean? I think we're on the way. Are we going to get there or not? I think we probably won't get there by 2050, which I know I shouldn't be saying, but the reality is that we've got such a huge journey. And if you look at EU legislation, there's even caveats in the legislation say, yes, we're going to be banning HFCs, but if, for safety reasons, we can't use X, Y, Z hydrocarbons, maybe we can still continue to use HFCs. So there is that possibility. So I think we've got a hell of a long way to go. Having said that, I think my members, European industry, and they're global, so American, Japanese, Korean, maybe even Australian one day, they are committed to it. There is no doubt. But that transition between HFCs, which are frankly a great product, to hydrocarbons will take a long time.
There is no silver bullet, right? It's a very complex issue that has many factors. To get to net zero, the power generation has to, become more renewably sourced. We have to stop burning fossil fuels. We have to reduce the GWP of refrigerants that we use. There are many other sectors of our world, agriculture and whatever, that all play a role. So, getting to these 2050 targets is a cumulative effort of which our industry has a role of a particular size, right? But, I think the overall everything is, we have to find the right balance, right? And that is safety, training, energy efficiency.
I think industry's got definitely the will. I think most definitely industry's got the will. governments have got the will, and the general population's got the will. It's our challenge is to find the way, and I think technology is just, we're not there yet.
In Europe, construction's on a down. Much easier if we have lots of new builds, but historically we have lots of very old buildings, so that's going to be a huge problem, especially if you're talking Italy, Spain, Greece, etc. And the other thing is, I think we mustn't forget the cost. And if I look at Europe, you've got the rich north, so Germany, Scandinavia, Belgium, Holland. We'll probably move forward much more quickly. There's more money, there's more incentives. But you go east or south, that's a massive issue. And I think the price of the machinery plus the installation, the maintenance, that's going to be a big key issue whether we get to 2050. And as you say, just the refrigerant change is just one small part of the complex solution challenge. Yeah. But as you say, we governments always think if they push industry enough, we'll find solutions, and I think it is working.
With all the changes we were doing in this industry related to efficiency and just the refrigerant changes that we had agreed to, had increased the cost of this equipment. And it's becoming unaffordable for, in the U.S., most customers, it's becoming unaffordable. And we need to understand that what our products provide, be it commercial be it refrigeration, be it cooling, be it heating or hot water, those are all necessities, and they're not luxuries. And by continuing to push and do some of these things, that affordability is really being impacted. And how do we make sure that we can continue to do that? And you're kind of seeing it, which we haven't talked about, which I'm kind of the backlash from the markets when it's gone too fast, and the swinging back and forth. In particular, Europe, with seeing what has happened there, where some of these initiatives have caused the far right to use that as an example and push the canceling of subsidies, canceling of things. And in the U.S., the same thing has happened. This has moved from an environmental engineering type conversation to part of the political campaign. I don't know if you understand that we have an election going on this year in the U.S., but this is now a red and blue, a Republican Democratic divide, and it's being used as a political football, which is the worst thing that we can have for industry because it provides uncertainty and doesn't give us where we need to go, in delivering on some of these commitments.
Well, that brings our roundtable to a close. I'd just like to thank all our participants today, and I'd also like to thank our sponsors, Refrigerants Australia and Refrigerants Reclaim Australia, for a very interesting roundtable. Thank you.